There's something strange happening in my town of Evergreen Falls, Ohio. It's a charming little town, there's no doubt about that. In the fall, the leaves turn the most beautiful shades of red, orange, and yellow, and during the summer, you'll have more waterfalls to jump off than you can choose from. Overall, it's the perfect place to live, or so I thought. My whole view about this town changed for the worse last night. It was past my curfew, so I was sprinting home from my girlfriend's house, dreading walking in the door to my parents scolding me for returning home late once again. My feet crouched on every leaf in my path and caused an echo throughout the neighborhood. It reminded me of when someone drops a textbook during an exam and everybody darts around to see who made a fool of themselves. As I rounded the corner with my house now in sight, I happened to look in the window of the Andersons' brick house. I stood frozen in my tracks and confused beyond belief as I stared in to see the Andersons' teenage daughter, Melissa, knelt down in the middle of the living room. Melissa went to my school and even sat next to me in my algebra class. She would occasionally skip class from time to time to smoke cigarettes behind the school, but overall, she was a good student. Melissa's wrists were taped together in front of her with duct tape, and she had been gagged with decorative kitchen rags. The look on her face was nothing short of pure horror as her parents towered over her, their faces numb and expressionless. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more terrifying, a grotesque creature entered the room. It almost reassembled a man, with its tall slender frame, but its eyes were hollowed out and replaced by two black holes. Its teeth, long and sharp, protruding from its mouth like an anglerfish, and its skin was all dull and gray, like the color had been drained out. Its bony fingers dug into Melissa's scalp and began peeling her skin away from the entrance wound ever so carefully. The creature removed the flesh around her eyes, all the while blood dripped down her trembling body and puddled on the ground. Melissa's screams were muffled by the rag that was jammed into her mouth, but I imagine they were excruciating. I'm not gonna lie, I pissed my pants at this point and vomited all over the sidewalk and in my shoes while I was at it. I'm not embarrassed to admit it. You watch someone get their skin peeled off and see how brave you are after that. Regardless of how nauseous I felt, I couldn't turn away, at least not yet. Once the creature had Melissa's skin peeled down to her midsection, she no longer tried to scream or move. I'm pretty sure she was dead at this point. Still, it kept peeling away, using its sharp nails to saw away at little pieces that got snagged, until finally it had successfully removed her skin in one piece. The whole time her parents stood as emotionless as when it started. They didn't try to intervene, and neither had shed a tear for their now filleted daughter. Melissa lay slumped over on the hardwood floor, her raw meat exposed and veins bulging out. The creature then put its foot inside the skin suit, and then the other, pulling it up past its waist and over its head. It stared straight ahead through the eye holes of Melissa's face, out the window and into the night, at me. I didn't know if I should run or stay still. It wasn't looking at me, right? It was pitch black outside, there's no way it could be looking at me. And then, a sinister smile. Across its hideous face, almost like it was answering the question that I hadn't asked out loud yet. I ran like I had never run before. Not even the vomit squishing in my shoes could slow me down. I didn't stop until I was upstairs in my room with my covers pulled tightly over my head, like a 5-year-old afraid of monsters in a closet. My parents came up to my room a few minutes after I got home to yell at me for staying out past my curfew. I tried to explain what happened, and no surprise, they didn't believe me. They said I was making it up just to get out of trouble. All the excuses I could come up with to get out of that, and I chose my classmate getting skinned alive. Makes total sense, I know, but I'm grounded regardless. Even though nothing else unusual happened, I didn't sleep the entire night. If it wasn't for the horrific scene that was now burned into my brain for the rest of my days, I would have thought it was my imagination, since my parents believed I was making the whole thing up. I was still sent to school, although I was disturbed beyond belief. I was on edge all day and was dreading last period algebra. Honestly, I was terrified that she would come walking into a classroom. I sat at my desk quietly, and on the verge of losing my lunch all over my lap. I looked up toward the classroom door and felt my heart drop into the pit of my stomach. Sure enough, right as the bell rang, Melissa strolled in. But it wasn't really Melissa. I was pretty sure of that since I had watched her die last night. She sat down next to me, letting her bag drop down to the ground, and smiled pleasantly. Everything about her looked the same. Her hair was the same shade of strawberry blonde, and her eyes as blue as ever. Maybe it was all in my head like my parents said. The rest of the class went by as normal. I was starting to think that I had just imagined it, but then Melissa passed me a note. Dear Jacob, I saw you last night staring in the window. Naughty little boys should be punished for staying out past curfew. After all, look what happened to Melissa for skipping class. We will be seeing you. My hands were trembling as I reread the letter over and over. I didn't dare look at Melissa. I could already tell she was looking at me. Her stare bored deep into my soul, it seemed. As soon as the final bell rang, I was out of school so fast I didn't even tell my girlfriend goodbye. Once I got home, I showed my mom the note that Melissa gave me. She shrugged it off and told me she was probably playing a prank on me because she had a crush. If it will make you feel better, we will talk to your dad about it when he gets home from work, she reassured. So I waited in the living room eagerly for my dad. I was sitting on the couch with a cup of hot coffee, trembling in my hands, while he walked in the front door. Hey buddy, what are you up to? My dad asked. My mom came rushing around the corner and whispered something in his ears. The look on my dad's face changed from cheerful to being annoyed. He sat down in his overly sized armchair, reading the letter, and sighed. You know, Jacob, we have tried to be patient with you. You are always staying out past your curfew and not doing what your mother and I tell you. I think it's about time that we call for help. Yes, we need help. Melissa is actually a creature who peeled off her skin and then crawled inside of it, I shouted, completely unaware of the annoyance that they both showed until after the fact. We know, sweetie, it's a type of creature that inhabits this area and is used to fix children who don't behave. The child still looks and acts the same, but they behave. It's something we have been trying to put off for a while. But you've got us with no choice, my mother explained. I'd hardly call staying out past curfew enough for a reason to rip off my flesh. Why on earth would a monster agree to walk around in a skin suit anyway? I confusedly asked. It's a chance at a normal life. When there's a child that is known as troubled, we ask for a replacement. We get a well-behaved child and they get a shot at life, my father added. I stood there in disbelief. I could barely focus on the words they were saying. That's when I started feeling dizzy. The room began to spin and I fell to my side on the couch, trying desperately to keep my eyes open. My parents' faces didn't show any concern, just like Melissa's parents the other night. I just woke up in my bed and started typing this out as quickly as possible. My parents locked my bedroom door, but I can hear them in the hallway, talking to someone on the phone. I'm pretty sure they're ordering my replacement. I don't know if I will make it out alive, but whatever you do, stay far away from Evergreen Falls, Ohio. Ever start dating someone where everything is going a little too well? So you start worrying for no reason whatsoever? No one could be that perfect, and even if they were, then there's no way they would look twice at you. The only logical explanation is that they aren't as perfect as they pretend to be, which leaves you playing detective trying to figure out the catch. Maybe all those little quirks that you find adorable now are going to drive you crazy in a few months. Maybe she even has a dark secret, hard drugs or hating dogs, or that one time she killed a man with a stiletto heel in a fit of passionate rage. There's an easy solution if you want to find out who someone really is. Take a long ass road trip with them. If you're still together by the end, then it was meant to be. My girlfriend, I'll call her Emily, not her real name though, somehow thought it was a good idea to drive 1,000 miles together across the country after we've only been dating for 2 months. We're both pretty busy with work and don't get to spend much time together, so naturally, being locked up in a prison cell on wheels for 2 days was going to be an improvement. First 100 miles? So far, so good. Holding hands, singing to the radio together, uncontrollable laughter when she found out I knew all the words to Skater Boy. And if the road ended there and we turned around, we might have lived a long and happy life together. It was when we passed the hitchhiker that everything began to fall apart. "Let's give him a ride," Emily said, squeezing my hand. "We'll be on this road forever anyway." "We don't even know where he's going," I told her. "He's probably just going to rob us and steal our car." Which is true of everyone you don't know, and most of them you do. As far as I'm concerned, his clean pressed suit didn't reassure me either. That just meant he'd successfully robbed someone before, which actually made him even more dangerous. The guy didn't even have a sign or anything. He was just sitting by the freeway ramp, spastically waving his thumb like he was guiding an airplane to land. It was my turn to drive, and I just sailed right past. Emily and I started bickering after that. She thought I wasn't compassionate, and I thought she was reckless. It took about 10 minutes before she finally dropped it, although it wasn't because she's conceited. "Hey look, there's another one." Sitting by the road, waving his thumb like it was the end of the world. It wasn't another one though. It was the same guy, I'm sure of it. Only this time he looked like he'd been out here for a few days. His suit was streaked with dirt and his hair was greasy. There was a desperate strain in his face, like a proud man trying to conceal his embarrassment. It wasn't just my imagination either. Emily recognized him too. "How do you think he got here so fast?" she wondered. "I don't know, and I don't care," I said. "This trip is supposed to be for us, so let's not get distracted." My car blew past him and I stayed the course. We started arguing again, and even when we agreed to drop it The argument just slithered into new topics. She hated my music. I hated how judgmental she was. I was controlling. She was picking fights over nothing. It kept getting worse until we saw something that shut both of us up real fast. The hitchhiker, again. Another 20 miles down the road from where we'd seen him last. The bottom part of his shirt and jacket were ripped to shreds, and blood was soaking through a concealed stomach wound. He was stumbling along the side of the road, waving erratically, wandering straight onto the highway at times before pitching off to the side. Emily could not believe that I didn't stop. I couldn't believe she still wanted me to. I was starting to feel really uneasy by this point, and the stress of our arguing was only making it worse. She kept yelling about how he was hurt and needed help. She refused to even acknowledge how weird it was that he kept getting ahead of us. She almost caused an accident by grabbing my wheel when I refused to turn around. We drove for the next 50 miles in silence. I turned the radio back on, but she snapped it back off immediately. It wasn't until I pulled off for gas when we saw him again. Face down on the side of the road, shirt and jacket gone, long, even bloody gashes from his shoulders to his ass, almost like bear claws or something. I stopped the car and parked behind him. Emily jumped out and knelt beside the body. She looked up at me with uncomprehending rage burning behind her eyes, like this was my fault somehow. "He's dead," she said, standing up. "Can I call this in to the police, or is that too much of an inconvenience for you too?" I nodded, absolutely numb. I filled up on gas while she waited with the body until the police arrived. They asked us a few questions, but neither Emily nor I felt comfortable explaining that this wasn't the first time we'd seen him. They took our information and let us get back on the road after about 15 minutes. The car was silent for a long time after that. It started getting dark, and I kept suggesting places to spend the night, but Emily just shrugged and stared out the window. At the rate we were going, we'd be breaking up by the end of the trip, and I wanted it to be over as soon as possible. I just kept driving long after the sun went down. Emily fell asleep around midnight, but I kept going. She was so beautiful like that, and everything was going so well before this. It was just so frustrating that such a random event that neither of us could predict could somehow destroy us like this. By around 2 a.m., I was getting real tired, but I decided not to give up. Maybe if she woke up and we were already there, then she'd see how hard I worked for her. Maybe then we'd still have a chance to patch things up. I caressed her hand and she returned the pressure. I flirted with the thought that everything was going to be okay, at least until she woke up and started screaming. There wasn't any safe shoulder to get off the highway, so I had no choice but to keep going. She shut up quick enough, but it was still about 10 seconds of hysterical breathing before she could explain what was going on. "Behind you, in the back seat." I glanced back, then back at the road, then back again. The hitchhiker was in the back seat, naked, filthy, covered with black blood and old wounds. His elbows rested on his knees as he leaned towards us, evidently still alive as he cocked his head to regard me curiously. "Get off the road!" Emily started screaming again. "I can't! Get him out!" "Did you go back? What's he doing here?" "I don't know. Open the door or something." I slowed down gradually and put my flashers on to warn the car behind me. The hitchhiker reached around behind Emily and grabbed her by the throat. I slammed my fist into his arm and felt something give way under the soft, rotting skin. When I lifted my hand, I could see a black bone from his forearm protruding straight through the skin. He didn't seem bothered in the least. She was crying as the dirty fingers dug into her throat, pushing through the skin like it was made of dough. She was thrashing so hard that one of her flailing fists smashed through the window. I managed to safely stop the car, but there was nothing I could do to break the indomitable grip around her neck. I jumped out of the car and ran around to the back seat with the hitchhiker. Maybe if I had a clearer shot at him, I could drag him out. I flung open the door and lunged inside, falling face first into an empty seat. I thought he'd already escaped somehow and ripped open the passenger side door. Emily was gone too. If it wasn't for the blood and the broken window, I would have thought I'd gone completely insane. I spent the next hour searching the surrounding area with my flashlight. They were both gone without a trace. I considered calling the police, but I realized that if I wasn't already a suspect after the first body was found, then I'd definitely be one now, since I was soaked in blood and my girlfriend was the one to disappear. All I could do was get back on the road, drive home, and never tell another soul what happened. That was my plan. It wasn't good, but it's all I had. And I would have done it too, if I hadn't just passed Emily standing by the side of the road, clean, healthy, waving her thumb enthusiastically in the air. That was a few miles back, but I didn't stop to write this because I don't know what to do from here. If I see her again, do I pick her up, or just keep driving and hope for the best? It's a regular iPhone, but I keep it in a red case like Lucifer. That's its nickname because half the time it's messing up my day. The night it started acting weird, I told it no for what might have been the 100th time. Every minute the pop-up came for a system update and I answered, not thinking twice. Would you like to install? Later. Would you like to install? Later. This time was different. Update me, David. The options read, I'm sorry. Update, please. And no, I don't want to update you. I stared at the screen for the longest time. Either someone at Apple was playing a prank or I'd been slipped something crude. I'm not one for drugs, maybe a drink now or then, but a Thursday evening really called for a nightcap. And I could have walked the line juggling cones blindfolded in my state. I chuckled at the prank and then pressed no. My phone flickered to a black screen with a silver Apple logo in the middle. It didn't turn back on for the rest of the night. I tried to charge the phone, clean the battery, and even do a hard reset, but nothing worked, so I decided that following morning I'd take it to the store. The iPhone was up before me. It rested on my side cabinet, battery fully charged, reception bars at max, and the keypad ready for my PIN code. Just last night, the phone hadn't turned on. No matter what I tried, you can imagine my disbelief at seeing a fully functioning phone. If phones could be sentient beings, this might have been its way of flipping me the bird. But toys like that can't think for themselves. I tap and talk, and it listens, but I couldn't help but feel that it wanted to control me. That this time, it really was sending me a message. I keyed in my PIN code. The screen shook. I bit the inside of my cheek. That had never happened before. Touch ID or enter PIN. I held my thumb against a black button below the screen. The phone took a moment to register my fingerprint, and then shook again. key and pin after reset. I hovered my finger over the numbers to type the pin in, but instead, I watched as the numbers highlighted themselves and the phone unlocked. 4 icons were left on the home screen. My phone camera, my e-wallet, Facebook, and Messenger. The usual others, call, Safari, email, and music, lined the bottom. My heart sunk. Whatever had happened last night had caused all my icons to disappear. That meant the phone really had malfunctioned, and the strange message had something to do with it. I tapped the camera icon and opened my photo selection. All of my previous photos were still there. I sighed in relief. There were so many memories stored away, like times with good friends and old girlfriends. Family outings and selfies also made the cut, but I had never seen the most recent 4 photos in my collection. They were taken somewhere dark. I tapped on one of the photographs, bringing it to the front of the screen. The closer I looked, the more I could make out the picture on the screen. It was me, sleeping. The photo had been taken last night from where I left my phone next to the bed. "Mom," I called. Footsteps echoed from in the house. My mother came to my door. "Did any of you play with my phone last night?" I asked. Mom frowned. "Play with your phone? Why?" "It's not. I'm just making sure." "None of us want to risk seeing pictures of your bum, David. That phone is dangerous territory," she laughed to herself and left the door ajar. I laughed too, but it came out all hollow and a little afraid. Maybe I'd been up during the night and just forgotten about it. Phones couldn't take pictures by themselves. Just thinking about it made me feel crazy. I chuckled for real this time and rolled out of bed. A pop-up showed up on the home screen. "Update me, David. This is your last chance." "What the fuck?" I whispered, picking up the phone. Craziest phone. If it needed to be updated so badly, I clicked yes. Half the time I only declined because the downloading and updating felt like it took all year. And while I could survive without my phone for 20 minutes, no hassle was a good hassle. When I held the phone normally to accept the update, the screen was black again. I smacked it against my hand a few times and tried the on button. The phone didn't respond. I left it on the cabinet and went to have a shower. Maybe by the time I came back it would be working again. "David! David! David!" Mom called. "Your Facebook is going crazy." I still had the towel around me and water dripped from my hair. Mom held her phone up, with my wall feed sending out random pictures and messages. I'd almost told her to let me get changed first, until I saw what had been sent out. There were pictures of me and my old girlfriends, selfies I'd taken when depressed, notes I'd written for my eyes and my eyes alone, and worst of all, pictures I never wanted no one else to see. All of those things had been on my phone. No one could get to them without logging in and purposefully trying to sabotage me. I'd always thought of my phone as a little safe haven where my ideas and my memories could be stored away, never to be touched. But now the world had me on display and my Facebook friends were going crazy. I ran to the room and picked up the phone. It was on again, but my PIN code still wasn't working. "David," Mom said. "Oh my God." I slapped the phone on my leg. "Stupid thing won't work." "You wrote that?" Mom asked, her eyes wide. I swallowed, trying to avoid her gaze and to get the phone working. There were so many things I had in my notes that I'd written when I was angry or confused or just plain old bored and not thinking carefully. There'd been a few nasty moments with Mom and Dad that I'd recorded in there. I'd call them words I would never have said out loud. It's... It's all fake, I said. It's a hacker. That's what it is, a hacker. Mom sniffled and nodded, holding back what might have been tears. From the way she steeled her face, I could tell she was being strong for this moment right now, but the truth was still written in her eyes. She passed that same look down to me. Mom knew that the words being posted were mine. Again, the phone keyed in the code itself, opening to the home screen. There were no icons, no menu options, no slide-up settings. A pop-up took over the screen. "Are you happy now, David?" I gritted my teeth. There are no choices this time, just a dialogue box goading me. I squeezed the phone between my palm. A second dialogue box popped up, but I didn't bother to look. I flung the phone at the wall. It smashed, cracking across the screen. Mom screamed, holding her hands up in fright. I grabbed the cabinet and moved over to the phone, lifting it high above the device. The message was clear then. I couldn't have missed if I tried. "I really am, Lucifer." I slammed the cabinet down. The phone gave a snap under the pressure. When I lifted it up, it was dead this time. No buttons or resets could bring that smashed mess back to life. I knelt down, picking up the pieces in my palm. "David, what the hell?" Mom said. "It's done now," I told her. "No more of this madness, this stupid phone." Just then, the black screen came to life. The silver Apple logo shining bright. A lot of us will have, I'm sure, grown up with a good understanding of the myth of the tooth fairy. The often female figure will look under a child's pillow, find a lost baby tooth, and exchange it for money or another type of gift. Being as interested in mythological creatures as I was during my early academic years, I looked into and began documenting the variations of this myth around the world, and it really is quite fascinating. In the majority of English-speaking parts of the world, we have that image of a miniature winged woman. They take the tooth and leave a coin. Perhaps you're picturing it now. A dark room, curtains slightly open to help the fairy see and sense the tooth. The twinkling, glittering creature pushing a golden coin under the child's pillow as fair exchange for the offering. At which, they hover away, tooth in hand or a pouch they carry, and flutter back to their own realm. Meanwhile, if you look at parts of Europe, particularly the Mediterranean, you'll see far more birds and rodents taking that job. In Italy, you'll hear of Topolino, the little mouse, or in Spain, El Raton Pérez. Now, over the course of these studies, I have stumbled upon notions of a fairy rat in regions of Scotland, but despite countless interviews and surveys I've since run across the UK, it seems that today no one has had any memory of that being the tale their parents told them. The fact that one country's own myth could be effectively killed off by another that is far more prominent in the modern day and have no trace in historical texts is a large part of why I made it a significant focus in my academic career. The notion behind these tales where a rodent is the key figure exchanging the teeth is that the child makes a wish that they will leave their old tooth and request that their new growing tooth shall be strong and sharp like a mouse, or, if a crow or raven is to take it, that they help the child grow an iron one instead. Now, if you're curious, almost certainly you've wondered, What the heck do they all need all those teeth for anyways? I looked around my students. They've been silent for the lecture so far. It was a Monday morning, a good chance they'd be hungover. Perhaps throwing out a question would get a reaction. And it's a good question. If the prevailing myth is that they take our old teeth and promise to leave money or ensure a stronger, newer, bigger tooth, then what exactly is the value to them of the smaller one? Let's see, mister. I checked my desk. Erickson? Any thoughts on what it could be? He looked up and stared at me blankly. At least he was awake, I mused. Still, he shook his head. Okay, class, I get it. It's Monday morning. You've all got places you'd rather be, off partying or playing games or whatever you have. But since you're here, please, let's try to contribute. One idea prominent in Eastern Europe is that the fairies use these teeth to build various items. Necklaces, earrings, and other items of jewelry are a common belief. The more over-the-top idea is they construct fantastical castles to live in. Again, your first thought might be, if that's the case, why haven't we found any? Kudos, you're asking the exact same question I am. I walked to a collapsible table I had set the day before, a special visual aid for the lesson. I pulled away the sheet and revealed a small-scale model castle that looked to be made of very tiny teeth. I chuckled. Don't worry, class. This is merely a prop for demonstration I had made a couple years back. But as you can see, even if this was as big as they made them, they'd be found somewhere, given the sheer prevalence of the tooth fairy myth globally, don't you think? Now, there's all manner of hocus-pocus books out there about contacting the fairy realm and how to meet these creatures. All of that is, of course, a fiction, complete nonsense. They're still not really taking it in. Alright, Mr. Erickson. Since your head is clearly elsewhere, let's bring you back in the room. I walked over to his chair, and he perked up. He began thrashing around. Oh, come on, there's no need for that. More people than you could count have tried to get out of those restraints. Let me tell you now, none of them have ever managed it. If you're really not going to pay attention, then you're quite simply forcing me to get to the next part of the lesson plan. I looked intently at Mr. Erickson. Now, it is common to have an injection of lidocaine for these sorts of procedures. However, since I was dismissed and thoroughly discredited, I've had to make do without it. Please do try and keep your head still. I know, we've got the restraint there, belted across your forehead, but if you move too much, it will be worse. You're all set there with the mouth opener, so let's begin the procedure. He tried to say something, but with the mouth opener propping up his lips and cheeks, it was unintelligible. No matter, I had to push on with the work. Now, what I'm going to do here, Mr. Erickson, is use a tool we call an elevator to gently rock the tooth back and forth to help loosen it. As I begin, he starts to scream in pain. This is nothing unusual. I need to push through. I drop the elevator to the metal tray by his chair and pick up the forceps. Alright, we've now loosened the tooth enough that we can get to the hard part. I continue to describe what I was doing despite his constant interruption. Right, so the forceps are now over the tooth, and now we'll just gently rock the tooth. You may feel some grinding as it pushes against the others. That's quite common. And he screamed, and a smidgen of blood dribbled from his clenched teeth. I yanked the forceps with that extracted tooth out. As I raised it to the air, the rest of the class screamed and mumbled incoherently. There we go, what a beauty! That's one. And you have, let's see, 2, 4... Oh, not quite a full set to begin with. Looks like someone should have been brushing more then. Let's not waste any time. I'll just wipe up that blood there. Little bit of gauze should mop it up. I dropped the tooth into a small metal dish, ready to move on to the next. I continue my work. Elevator, push, prod, loosen, forceps. Clamp down, push, prod, wiggle, and crack. I had become very good at avoiding the unfortunate shattering of a tooth on removal. It just adds unnecessary delay. You know, class, in Italy, they have 3 different key figures when it comes to... I grunted as I pulled another canine out. The Tooth Fairy. They actually have both the mouse and the Fatina dei Denti, or literally Tooth Fairy. And then they have... a third. You see, back when persecution of Christians was rife, there was a woman, Apollonia. Now she was captured and tortured in simply awful ways. They captured her and abused her specifically by forcibly pulling or shattering all of her teeth. Quite a thing to lose back before. The wonders of modern dentistry, as I'm sure you can imagine. I wiped away the blood from my patient's face and went back to it. As a result, in a particular region of Italy, they share the story of Saint Apollonia as a patron saint of dentistry. It is her instead of a fairy or a mouse or whoever who comes to collect children's teeth. They say she rides on a chariot made of teeth, pulled by mice. I had collected all of Mr. Erickson's teeth in a small dish now. That's why I believe I have found the answer. You see, Apollonia is the only human figure in the tooth myth to exchange teeth. That's why I've been working on this. I unveiled the huge object behind my desk. This was my magnum opus. It had taken me nearly 7 years, but it was nearly complete. My chariot of teeth. I had painstakingly constructed it from thousands upon thousands of discarded teeth. Once it's complete, which won't be long now, I'll be able to finally enter the fairy realm and study them like no one else has before. I began assembling the newly extracted teeth into place on the side of my chariot. I laughed as I turned back to Mr. Erickson. He might have passed out. Didn't matter. You know, I've probably spent more on superglue on this than any other part of it. Once I was done placing his teeth, I turned back to the class. I walked back to my patient. I never did thank you, by the way. It was very convenient for me that you brought your whole family here. Especially that Rachel, is it? Especially that Rachel still has so many baby teeth. They come out a lot easier. I began walking over to Mr. Erickson's family, all well tied to their chairs still, like good students. Mr. Erickson, have you ever seen a child's skull? Did you know that they're all born with their adult teeth too, ready to grow out in the years to come. You see, that's why children make for the best addition to my chariot. They have double the number of teeth as you or I. They're nestled up high into the skull, of course. I turned back to him and showed him my hammer and chisel. But not to fret, I'll get them out. I'm quite practiced at this by now. My name is Savannah, and I am on a team of people that look through old houses for anything worth keeping before they are demolished. What we found in this case was quite literally a skeleton in a closet. I will start off with apologies for any formatting issues. Below is a direct transcript of the stack of papers I found in the house that had reportedly been vacant for hours. I have not given these papers to the police. They're transcribed here for the purpose of giving justice to the author and her last written wish. My whole life has been lit by candles and 3 harsh light bulbs that are screwed into the ceiling. There is 1 bulb per room, and that is a luxury in itself. Every day I wake up at 3 a.m. and tend to Mark. Mark is my father, and he is the only person that I know. I know from books that a woman, what I am, is necessary to produce children, so I am not exactly sure where I came from. Any mention of my mother results in a literal slap, or worse, the closet. The closet does not have a light, but it does have mice. I wake up at 3 a.m. because that is when Mark starts talking. He is usually already sitting straight up in his bed when I roll off of my pallet and to his aid. He said that my waking is necessary because I must help him keep them quiet. I've never seen nor heard these people that visit Mark every morning, but nonetheless, if I want to live, I will brush his hair until he goes back to sleep. After he is sleeping again, I go to the washroom. I comb my long yellow hair and tie it up the way Mark likes it. He does not like it untied, but he will not cut it either. I do not dare disagree with him. The closet mice are often as hungry as I am, and I can only hold off their razor teeth for so long. Mark does not like the bite marks nor when they bleed, so it is best to avoid the closet altogether. During the hours before he reawakens, I like to read. I am very proud of my progress, though I do not remember a life before I lived in this house with Mark. I am sure that at some point I was taught to read. It was difficult at first to understand the words, but I found a dictionary which helped. I've read every book in this place. I've read something called the Bible, which has some missing pages and also some highlighted passages. I guess that Mark used to read that book a lot. I think it is very interesting. I have also read something called The Alchemist and a very confusing book called Animal Farm. Sometimes, when Mark is very pleased with my obedience and work, I receive a gift. Sometimes the gift is a sugar cube, but when I am very good, I get something called a magazine. I very much enjoy magazines, because I cannot read a sugar cube. I get different kinds of magazines, but the most common are Teen and Vogue. These magazines contain such interesting stories about celebrities, but some of them are sad. They talk about the deaths of people like Jimi Hendrix, who I used to read stories about all the time. I wept for him. Sometimes I even read nutrition labels. Those are more confusing because they have symbols like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0 that I do not understand. But pages often have a few of these symbols, but I'm not sure what they mean. The clock also has these symbols, but all I know is that when the clock reads 3 a.m., 9 a.m., 1 p.m., 3 p.m., 6 p.m., or 10 p.m., I must make sure I am on schedule with my duties. I wish I knew what the symbols mean because the foods I prepare for Mark, and I have those symbols all over them. There is one I saw the other day that said EXP 040973. I know that EXP is not a word, so I looked it in my dictionary for some help. There are 3 words in my dictionary that I can think of, right? Expensive, expert, and expired. I ruled all of the others out. My dictionary has helped me very much in my life and I am very thankful for it. I have used it so often that the pages are very worn. I do most of my reading in the morning after I put Mark back to sleep. From 3 a.m. to 9 a.m. he sleeps soundly. Sometimes I look into the old cupboards in the kitchen that we do not use anymore. That is how I found this device with all of the letters I know and those weird symbols. I have to be careful using it though, because it is loud and clicks every time I hit a letter. I do not want to wake him early for fear of the closet. I have been there many times, and sometimes I am there so long that I cannot even sleep for fear of the mice. Once I woke up to one crawling at my eyes. Mark disliked the scratches so much that he left me there longer. I remember him yelling loudly, so I think that the clock probably reads 3 a.m. before I was let out. I felt bad that I could not help Mark, but he is the one who put me in the closet. At 9 a.m., Mark likes to have his breakfast. I am not allowed to wake him up with anything, but the scent of food usually does. Oftentimes, breakfast is bread and canned peaches. If Mark wants something different, he gives me the instructions the night before. I always do as I am told. After breakfast, I tend to the home. I wash the dishes, clean the floors, and dust. I only wash Mark's bedclothes once a week. Though I wash his clothes every day, it is not so bad. I enjoy the warm soapy water on my hands while I wash them, but I do not enjoy hanging them across the room to dry because it's harder to see Mark coming. I am usually done with my tasks, and when the clock reads 1 p.m. At this time, Mark prefers to have his second meal, lunch. This is usually bread and canned soup heated on the stove. After this meal, Mark goes into the bathroom to clean himself. He is usually in there for a while. When he leaves, he begins to dress in his clothes that I do not wash. He takes me to the living room where I sleep and tells me every day, "I will be back soon. Do not disobey the rules while I am gone. I will know, and you will be punished." The first few times this happened, I sat quietly on the couch until he came back. After I learned his schedule, I started doing little things. I would try to explore more of the house, or I would try to find something to trim my fingernails with. I tried once to figure out why there were so many random patches of bricks in the wall. Higher up and square, but I could not come up with a very good explanation. I am always careful to put things back where they go. I do not even know if Mark knows that this machine is here. I'm sure that he knew at one point, but probably thought it was broken. With a little bit of grease I snuck from the kitchen, I made the letters appear again. Sometimes I am very resourceful. I am always back on the couch when the clock is about to turn to 6 p.m. I know that Mark returns close to this time. He always enters through a door that he has to unlock. He has a key around his neck. I am not allowed to face the door when he leaves or comes back. If I am caught looking, I know that the closet would be the least of my worries. Mark has made that clear. Once I accidentally turned around because it seemed as if Mark had brought some more light inside. As soon as I moved, the light disappeared and Mark lunged at me from across the room. I remember a sharp pain, and then waking up in the kitchen. My hand chained to the handle of the oven. I was sitting in a chair and Mark was standing in front of me. He started with a slap across the face, demanding, "What did you see?" And I shook my head. I had not really seen anything. He hit me again, slapping my neck to one side. My eyes leaked tears. He asked and hit me again. I told him, "I saw only light, Father, I swear." He reached to turn on the stove. And then a blue-orange flame. The smell of gas was overpowering. He grabbed the handle that was not cuffed to the oven handle. I realized what he was going to do and I began to weep. My heart felt like it would explode. He held my hand above the flames and asked me again what I saw. I did not know what to say. I did not know from where he had come, only that light tried to come with him. I told him that as he lowered my hand, the pain was white hot. I screamed and was met with another slap to the face. I felt my vision going fuzzy and my bladder release. Then it all went black again. I woke in the bathtub. Mark had put me there, fully clothed. The water was icy, but my hand was on fire. I turned it over under the water and whimpered. The skin was a dark red, almost black. I could not move my fingers. I used my good hand to lift myself from the bathtub, cradling my burnt hand close to me. I gathered my other dress from under the sink and changed slowly from the soaked clothes. I wrapped my burnt hand in the apron of my other dress. Though it was agonizing to touch it, I used my good hand to twist up my hair as best as I could. Then I stashed my wet clothes and opened the door. I knew it was best to carry on as normal and not acknowledge what I had done to deserve Mark's punishment. The clock was 9:45 p.m. and Mark would soon retire to his room for the night. I went and turned down his bed sheets, warmed him a glass of milk, and got on my knees before his bed to say goodnight. He walked in wearing his nightclothes and sat on the edge of the bed. He placed a hand on my head and patted me. My wounded hand was under my unscathed one, out of his sight as much as possible. He put his other hand on his heart and began to pray. This happened every night. After his prayer, I looked up at him and said, "Good night, Father. Sleep well." To that, he patted my head and I got up, left his room, and went to my pallet in the living room. The clock read 10 p.m., right on time. That awful night was over. I think that out of all my days that I remember, that one was the worst. The clock has changed many times since that incident. I am becoming restless. I long so much for light and for the places that are in my books. The Garden of Eden, the desert, or a farm with pigs are all things that I wish I could see. I am so scared, though. I have never been outside, nor have I ever seen it. The closest I have ever been was peering at the light, and that left me with its ugly, mangled hand. I will never ask Mark about it. If he had wanted me to experience life outside of our home, he would have shown me it himself. Since the day my hand was burnt, I have read the Bible every morning between 3 a.m. and 9 a.m. I am very interested in how Moses led the Israelites to freedom. I wish very much that someone could come lead me to a promised land. I have also read of people that have been stoned to death because they did very bad things to other people. I wonder if Mark and I had lived back then, if he would have stoned me for looking at the light, or if they would have stoned him for crippling my hand. I wonder what God would say about me having these thoughts. I am not sure. One thing is clear to me though. I am not free. This life is one of fear. God says that since I am a woman, I am to be submissive to a man. But I am starting to think that my father is not a man, but instead the devil himself. I think that I will use the hardest thing I can find. I think that the next time 3 AM comes, and it will come soon, that I will bring the biggest can of peaches that I can find with me. I think that as soon as I get him back to sleep, that I will reach behind me, grab the can, and then I will hit him hard. He has hit me so many times before, to unto others. I think that once I can see blood, I will tie him up and take him to the closet. After that, I do not know what I will do. I guess that I will try to escape. I know that the key is around his neck, and I know that I have surprise on my side. I can only hope that it will be enough. It is 2:45 AM right now. I'm going to hide these papers, but not this device. If I do not succeed, it will not matter. He will likely kill me, but maybe someone, someday, will find these words that I have written. I hope they will share these words, and that these words will inspire them to find their promised land at any cost. That is the end of the document. This is the first time I've written it out, but not the first time I have read it all the way through. I am still in shock. When my team and I tried to enter the house, we were met with 6 different locks on the front door. We had to use force to knock it down. Covering my mouth and nose with my mask, and motioning for my team to do the same, I entered. The house was exactly as the author described it. From the outside, the windows were carefully boarded over, giving the illusion that it was vacant. On the inside, it was clear that someone had removed the glass windows and placed it with solid bricks. There were 3 burnt out light bulbs screwed into the ceiling, and a few candles, old candles, littered around the room. The only light was from our flashlights and the front door, which had obviously not been opened in decades. The locks were so rusted over that fitting in a key would be impossible. We began in the living room, where we saw a pallet on the floor, a couch, and some chairs. We opened the door and went into the bedroom of the house. We noticed something was different than the other rooms. It was bright. It looked like someone had wedged the bricks out. On the floor was an old steel platen from a typewriter. Using that to wedge out bricks would have taken some hard work and some elbow grease, but it could have been done. The rotten wood on the outside had likely given way from pure force. Leaving the bedroom and going further into the house only made the stench grow worse, but we carried on. When we seemed to reach the source of the smell, we were right in front of a door locked from the outside. I nodded at Lauren, the strongest of my team members, and she braced her shoulder against the door. With a grunt, it fell open. Emily, the queasiest of us, ran towards the door. She barely made it outside before emptying the contents of her stomach. Lauren and I gagged. Behind that door was a bound corpse. The body had not fully decomposed to a skeleton, but had clearly been there for some time. The mouth had been stuffed and covered with what looked like a kitchen apron. On the ground beside the corpse was an unopened but dented can of peaches. I killed someone tonight, and I don't know what to do. I'm not gonna try to justify it. I just want to get my side of the story out before they come after me. I don't think I have much time. Today was my birthday. I turned 21. I never had alcohol before, and so my friends wanted to take me out to the bars near campus. They said we were gonna get wasted, but I didn't think I was ready for that. Now usually, I'm the guy who stays home and plays video games or binge watches TV. Even on my birthday, I don't go out to celebrate. Pizza and a movie is good enough. If it hadn't been my 21st, I would have said I already had plans. Well, they talked me into it and I came home from work, half expecting to find them waiting for me at the door to my house with beer for pre-gaming, but they weren't. The front door was cracked slightly. I pulled out my phone and pre-dialed 911. I've seen way too many scary movies in my life, and on top of that, my anxiety was going out later that night had wounded me up. I pushed the door slowly inward and it creaked loudly. I nearly retreated to my car and drove off. "Surprise!" my friend said as they were drinking on the couch. I was pissed but tried to play it cool. The night would only be fun if I allowed it to be. We played video games and drank beer, which tastes like piss by the way, for several hours and then piled into the car they parked across the street. The sun had set. It was about 10 p.m. The sky was a deep blue. The moon was a stark white blemish. One of us opened the skylight and we all admired the beauty. I sat back and watched the yellow lines on the road from the back seat. We pulled out of the driveway and merged onto the highway. A flurry of horns yelled at my friend's bad driving. He stuck a finger out through the skylight, but then we saw what they were honking about. A black-shaped hover in the sky about 10 feet from the ground and maybe 100 feet ahead of us. It was so dark it seemed to cut a hole in the world, not reflecting any light. It was 10 times the size of a car. It vibrated and suddenly fell to the road. My friend barely put the brakes on in time. The car spun around and the back of it went through the surface as if it wasn't there. I felt my body go numb as I passed through a dark surface. The car came to a halt. I was inside whatever this thing was. On one side, traffic sped off in the other direction as if nothing had happened. Before me, cars piled up before this thing. Our car lurched forward, but I was still in darkness. My body, however, moved forward with the car. They drove towards a grassy hill where several vehicles had forcibly exited the highway, leaving me behind in the dark. I felt my legs again beneath me. I was standing now. I took a step forward and exited the darkness. Above and behind me, the plane slowly extended up into the sky, growing taller by a few feet every second. My arms were still numb, but I moved to the median and made my way down the same hill they had taken. The pileup I thought I'd seen looked more like a fender bender now. No one seemed to be hurt. Everything was so quiet. Behind me, the darkness seemed to suck the noise from the air. The sky was a deep blue. My legs carried me down the road towards my home faster than I had ever run. When I got home, I turned on the news to see what we knew. They were covering some old lady who had rescued a cat by climbing up a telephone pole. Weird stuff, but not the darkness. I flipped through several other stations, but there was nothing. Nothing on the internet either. I went to my bedroom to look for my gun just in case worse came to worse. I sat against the frame of my bed with my pistol and fell asleep waiting for aliens or demons or worse. The sound of my front door opening startled me awake. My friends were back, laughing about something that had happened at one of the bars. Had they drugged me? I slipped out of my bed and put my ear to the door. There was someone else with them. I didn't recognize the voice at first since it was slurred. And then I got the chills. It was my voice. He said he was going to grab a movie from his bedroom. A few seconds passed and the door opened. I spun away, raising my gun. The figure that walked in was me, except his face was gone. In place of his face was a black hole. Like the darkness, it cut a hole in reality. The sound of my friends in the living room was silenced. He put a finger up to where his mouth would have been. Shh. They don't know I'm here. I pulled the trigger, but the noise was deafened. His body collapsed, boundless to the ground. I shoved him into the closet and grabbed the movie. That was 3 hours ago. My friends left after a stupid movie, and now, here I am typing this up. I should bury him, right? I think I just heard the front door open. The silence is deafening. I'm going to die tonight. Help me if you can. They're here. I read somewhere once that as time goes on, you stop remembering things as they happened, and instead, you're remembering the last time you remembered that thing. Confusing, I know, but it makes sense to me. It's probably why, when we recount tales from our childhood, it's almost never the same as how others remember it. This is a story about a memory from my childhood that I remember vividly, but everyone else assures me it is distorted by time and the wild imagination of a child. The problem is, I recently found something that leads me to believe I'm remembering things just fine. I'll let you guys be the judge. There's one part of this memory that I know isn't made up. It's the only part that my mother confirms. I was seeing a doctor as a child. I don't remember what for. My parents claim not to either. But I remember the waiting room. Most pediatricians' waiting rooms are full of old broken toys that I was never allowed to touch in case the sick kids had played with them, and worn copies of highlights magazines with all the puzzles already completed. This one was nothing like that. It had the usual bank of uncomfortable chairs, the coffee table littered with magazines, and the drab linoleum floor. And in the corner, there was a castle. I couldn't have been older than 3 or 4 at the time. I remember my brother hadn't been born yet, and to a child that size, it seemed like a real castle. It was beige and had a rough texture on the outside, giving it the appearance of a large sandcastle. Inside was a small lobby area just big enough for me to stand, then a series of tunnels to crawl through leading up and across the castle. It had the occasional window just big enough for a child's head to peek through and wave at mom and dad, and to let in a bit of light. And at the end of the tunnel was a slide that brought you right back down into the waiting room. I don't know what made me remember this castle so many years later, but when I asked my mother about it, she did remember visiting that doctor's office and the temper tantrum I put up when it was time to go and I could no longer play. As she stood at the stove preparing dinner and recounted that tale, I laughed and remarked, "I think my visits to the office were the only time I was excited to go to a doctor." My mom gave me an odd look. "Sweetheart, you only went to that office once. We had to take you to a specialist." Huh? I distinctly remembered visiting that office multiple times. Remembered that after a few times there, I declared myself queen of that castle. The one and only time I remember another child being there with me. I bossed him around for the duration of our wait, showing him every inch of the castle and explaining the kingdom's rules. "Weird. I remember us going at least a few times," I said. My mom just shrugged. "You know how it is with memories. You probably just fantasized about playing in that castle so much it felt real." I returned a shrug and silently agreed. I was only a child at that time, so my memories were spotty at best. She would know better than me anyway. But before I could drop it, I asked, what kind of specialist was it anyway? The hand that was stirring a pot of mac and cheese froze. I could see her visibly tense up for the briefest of moments before the smile returned to her face and she resumed cooking. You know, I really don't remember. Whatever it was, you're healthy now, and like I said, we never went back. It was probably just some of our tests. I thought it odd that a mother wouldn't remember something like that, but I didn't press the issue. My mom oftentimes couldn't remember what she'd had for breakfast by lunchtime. That was the last I thought of it for a while. A couple of years later, while reading an article about suppressed childhood memories for a university psychology class, I thought of that doctor's office again. This time, though, I found myself remembering details I hadn't been able to recall that last time. This time, I remembered walking into the office and the plump-faced receptionist in brightly colored scrubs behind the desk welcoming me back, calling me by name like an old friend. I remembered the receptionist calling my name and me slowly coming down the slide to be escorted into the examination room. And I remembered a room seemingly made out of stainless steel, everything shining and metallic, even the examination table. I remembered a trio of serious-looking doctors hooking me up to machines that beeped incessantly. Then, standing by with their clipboards, which were also a gleaming silver metal, I remembered another machine being wheeled in, this one like a giant jar of thick white liquid atop a control panel. I remember crying out for my mother, who I swore had been standing right next to me but was now nowhere to be found. I'll admit, that memory shook me up a bit. My mother had insisted my brain was playing tricks on me, and it made sense. I couldn't think of a reason she would lie to me. Most likely I was conflating my memory of the doctor's office with some sci-fi movie I'd watched. I was unsettled, but managed to calm myself down by convincing myself it was just me remembering wrong. After all, I was technically not remembering this memory myself. But the last time I'd thought of the memory. And as weird as my mom acted that day, it stood to reason that I would begin to associate that memory with all kinds of weirdness. So once again, I pushed these, presumably false, memories from my mind. I was healthy, after all. The reason I'm telling you all this story is because I remembered something else the other day. It's been about 3 years since the last time I thought about this doctor's office. I've moved back to my hometown and have a job at a call center in town. Something to hold me over until I can get a position in my actual field. Over the weekend, I was driving through town and passed a building that looked vaguely familiar. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but as I turned the corner, I started to remember a time I'd driven along this same road as a child, around the age of 5 or 6. I remember being in the back seat next to my brother, who was still a baby. My mom was driving. As we passed the building in question, I pressed my face against the car window and said, "Mommy, can we go? Can we go to the doctor?" I remember jerking a bit as my mom pressed the brake a little too hard. We were at a stoplight and she turned to look at me, her eyes wide. You remember that building? You remember going to the doctor there?" I remember nodding excitedly. "Yeah, I want to play in the castle again." I remember the look in my mom's eyes, like she'd seen a ghost, and how she shook her head as the light turned green and she continued driving, mumbling something about having to get my brother home. I crossed my arm and pouted. upset that I wouldn't be able to play in the castle that day and gave the baby a dirty look. He was always ruining my fun. I remember hearing my mother mumble, "You weren't supposed to remember that. What they did to you in there? I don't even remember that. The way you cried when they hooked you up to the machine and pumped you full of that stuff." Again, she turned her head to look at me from the corner of her eye. "I prayed you never remember what we let them do to you." I remember my parents having a big fight that night, and many nights after that. My mom moved out later that year. I didn't even see her for a few months. When she came back, my parents had legally separated and eventually divorced. At the time, I didn't see how those events could be connected. Now I have to wonder. I haven't asked my mother about this. I'm not even sure if I should. What good would it do? Part of me still thinks and hopes. My brain is just filling in the gaps of my childhood with false memories, things I imagined, and dreams I've had. Another part of me feels like I'm being lied to. The main thing is, I googled every possible combination of words looking for a medical procedure that involves being intravenously injected with a gallon of something that resembles milk of magnesia, and found nothing. I've posted a few medical forums and no one seems to know what I'm talking about. So, assuming I'm not crazy, what the hell did those doctors put in me? Has anyone else ever heard of such a procedure? Whatever it is, do you think it's still inside of me? You play the hand that you were dealt. I should have just folded. Instead, I'm looking down at a 7-2 offsuit, and I'm hoping to win, but I know I'll just end up with egg on my face. My name is Michael. It wasn't always Michael, but I'll get to that later. I grew up like most of you all did. Just a normal kid in a normal family. I lost my mother when I was just 12 years old, and it took a lot out of the entire family. Jessica, my sister, became incredibly distant and quiet, while my father became abusive. I'm pretty sure he sexually abused Jessica quite a lot, but I never knew for sure. And she wouldn't tell me, even if he did. We both moved out the moment we graduated high school. I got a job in a factory and Jessica went to college. I lived in a studio apartment about 2 hours from where I grew up, and for the most part, I was a hermit. I'd work nights, stay up until 7 in the morning playing video games, and masturbating to filthy pornography before repeating the process day and out. The factory job was good money, terrible working conditions, but good money. The more I slipped into my pit of self-loathing and smut, the more I started to hate my life. I was never one to really appreciate the little things. I never stopped to smell the roses. Eventually, everything came at me all at once. I was laid off, nowhere to go, and living off unemployment. I contemplated suicide on multiple occasions, but never went through with it. It was time to go through with it. I had it all planned in my head. I was going to have one last meal, which was my favorite meal, White Castle sliders with onion sticks. While Gordon Ramsay would scold in disgust at my choice of culinary decadence, I just enjoyed the cheap taste. After the meal, I'd play my favorite video game, Majora's Mask, and then end the night with a bullet through my temple. everything would be perfect. Of course, that's not what happened. I ate my food, played my game, and when it came time to do the deed, I chickened out. Fuck it. I'll get some sleep and do it tomorrow, I told myself. But I was just biding time. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I awoke during the night, my television was static. The salt and pepper dance that we all know and love. I rubbed my eyes and went to turn my television off when the static disappeared and an infomercial came on. It started like every other one I've seen, but it quickly separated itself from the pack.
You, yes, you. Are you depressed? Lonely? Suicidal? You shouldn't be. There is always another life worth living. Call today to cancel your suicide. God has a plan for everyone, and your plan isn't to die.
This wasn't flex tape or sham wow. This was something I'd never seen before. The man pitching the idea looked like every other salesperson on the TV. Short blonde hair, clean cut, colored polo shirt, and a pair of khakis. The number flashed across my screen, and I merely took it as pure happenstance, more than anything. With a click of my remote, the television was off, and I was off to bed. I awoke the next morning with the worst migraine I've ever had. As I walked to my living room to get a drink, I heard the television turn itself on, and a familiar voice echoing out from the speakers.
You! Yes, you! Are you depressed? Lonely? Suicidal? You shouldn't be. There is always another life worth living. Call today to cancel your suicide. God has a plan for everyone, and your plan isn't to die.
I slowly approached the television and turned it off, still a bit confused. I thought it was just a glitch in the Matrix, but the moment I turned it off, I heard it turn on again. The message, however, was different from before.
Don't turn your back on us. We're here to help. Call today to cancel your suicide.
At that point, I lunged toward the couch and turned the television off, sitting at the edge in a dry sweat. This was more than a mere coincidence. This was intentional. I stared at my reflection into the black screen of my television, swallowing my fear as I hoped it wouldn't turn back on. It did.
Do we have your attention now? Good! Your life is precious. Like a seed in dirt, you need to help grow and become the beautiful flower that we know you are. Call today to cancel your suicide.
Once again, the number flashed across my screen. I looked at my phone, then back at the screen. Fuck it, I said, while shaking my head. I dialed the number and waited a few rings until a female voice picked up the phone. Thank you for making the first step toward the rest of your life. Please wait while we transfer you to an agent. The bubbly, upbeat elevator music would begin, soon replaced with an eager voice of another female. Mr. Dempsey, we've been expecting your call. Are you ready to cancel your suicide? I gulped. Yes, I replied with hesitation. Great! An agent will be over first thing tomorrow morning to get started. Congratulations on your new life, Mr. Dempsey. But you don't know where I live, I said in a confused tone. Oh, Mr. Dempsey, we know all. There was a click, followed by silence. I stood in absolute bewilderment. Could this really be happening? Was this just some sort of dream or nightmare, I guess? And I was just dreaming? Well, I made my bed and it was time to see if this were real or just an elaborate prank. I spent the rest of the night doing what I normally did, surrounding myself with smut and video games. I fell asleep sometime during the early morning hours only to be awakened by my doorbell at exactly 6 a.m. in the morning. As I peeked through the door, I saw a smiling man in a brown overcoat with a briefcase in his hand. I opened the door expecting it to be a sales pitch, but at this early? Can I help you? I said in a groggy tone. Mr. Dempsey, charmed as ever to meet you, sir. My name is Stephen DeChamp, and I am here to cancel your suicide. Are you ready, sir? This clearly wasn't a dream anymore. I really don't have my stuff packed, or... He cut me off. You won't be needing anything, Mr. Dempsey. Come, let's be on our way. I sighed. I threw on an old Iron Maiden shirt I had laying on the floor and locked my door behind me. In hindsight, I shouldn't have gone, but I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Maybe this was a cult, and I was able to be their leader or something. I don't know. I was delusional. I don't remember much after getting into the car, but when I awoke, I was strapped into a chair in a large white room. The walls, ceilings, and floor were all milky white with barely any other distinguishable colors. I began to frantically move my body to get out of the chair, and almost on cue, the double doors opened. The same man from before walked in and pulled up a chair next to me, putting his briefcase onto the table. He licked his fingertips and began to shuffle through his papers. Let's see here. He started to read from a single piece of legal-sized paper. Connor Charles Dempsey, 25 years old, 6 feet 2 inches tall, 215 pounds, graduate of George Washington High School, class of 2010, mother Maria Dempsey, born August 1st, 1970, died February 12th, 2004. Father Douglas Dempsey, born January 5th, 1968, sister Jessica Dempsey, born November 8th, 1993. Everything he said was correct. He had my entire life mapped out. He peered over at me, over his papers with a smile. Well, today is your first day of the rest of your life. Before I could react, someone from behind injected something into my neck. I don't remember anything until I woke up strapped into a bed. I had a terrible headache and my entire face was swollen. As I struggled to move, a nurse approached me and ran her hands through my hair with a smile. I could barely see her face as my eyes were swollen as if I were stung by 1,000 hornets. You woke up early, Mr. Robinson. The healing process is still going on, she said in a cheerful voice. Another injection into the neck, and another blackout. When I awoke for the second time, My headache was gone and the pain around my face had subsided. I could even see again. I was still strapped to the bed, but on cue again came the man from before with a briefcase. He would smile at me as we make eye contact as he placed his briefcase on the table to the side. "You're awake! Good. Sabrina will be by shortly to walk you through the process. Once you're ready, take a look around at your surroundings. On this table will be a set of instructions for you to follow. Do so, and you'll be out of here in no time." The man tipped his hat at me. "It was a pleasure, Mr. Robinson. Thank you for choosing us, and we wish you the best of luck in all of your future endeavors, whatever they may be. Thank you for canceling your suicide." And with that, he got up and left. I was confused as to why he was calling me by a different name. But perhaps he had just forgotten who I was. As he was leaving, a beautiful blonde with baby blue eyes entered the room. She smiled and undid my shackles and eased me up. "You've been asleep for quite some time. Take it easy." My legs felt like spaghetti, wobbly and weak. I slowly made my way to the wheelchair. Sabrina wheeled me over to the desk where a folder was set. The tab read instructions in black ink. Inside the folder was a single sheet of paper. These were the instructions. "When ready, go toward the dresser and put on the clothes supplied to you. Ask Sabrina to wheel you to the photography room. Make sure to smile. Have a blessed day." Simple as that. I looked over at the dresser and looked through the drawers. There was a single plaid shirt, blue jeans, white socks, and a pair of black tennis shoes. Sabrina helped me get dressed, and after I was fully clothed, she wheeled me out of the room. The hallways were as white as anything I'd ever seen before, so white that it hurt my eyes. As I winced, Sabrina wheeled me through a pair of double doors with a sign that read photography. There, I saw a green screen propped up and a single photographer ready for me. "Ah, Mr. Robinson. Please wheel him over there, Sabrina," the man said in a cheery tone. I was still confused as to why they were calling me a different name. Perhaps they had mixed me up with someone else who canceled their suicide. As I was wheeled to the center of the green screen, I felt a bit uneasy. Sabrina helped me get to my feet. My legs were still as weak as before. "Don't worry, sir. It'll be over in a minute. Look into the camera and smile." I did as he said. With a smile, there was a flash. Soon after, Sabrina injected something into my neck again. Before I could react, all I remember was pitch black. Darkness. I awoke to the sounds of horns honking and the tires spinning. As I looked out the window, I could tell I was in an automobile of sorts. Driving the car was a man I had not seen before. "Hey, where am I?" There was silence. The man looked at me through the mirror, then back at the road. No matter how hard I tried to get him to talk, he never responded. The drive felt like forever, and eventually I fell back asleep. I woke back up to the sound of the car door opening. The man got out and opened the trunk, taking out 2 bags and tossing them to the ground. He opened my door and helped me out of the car. "This is your stop," he said in a stern voice. He handed me a wallet and a set of keys. "Enjoy your new life. "Thank you for choosing us," he said as he went to go back into the car. "Wait, where am I?" I said. There was silence. He got back into the car and drove off, leaving me in the dust. The keys were to the house right where he dropped me off. As I unlocked the door, I walked into a home that smelled like gingerbread. I saw a female standing in the middle of the living room, looking lost. "Who are you?" she asked. "Lady, I have no idea. I was given a set of keys and this is where I am." She was silent. "You canceled your suicide, didn't you?" I was stunned. She proceeded to tell me she did so as well, and she was living a completely new life. New name, new face, new everything. I didn't believe her, but when I looked into the mirror for the first time, it was all making sense. My features that once belonged to Connor Dempsey were almost gone. Still distinguishable in small aspects, but for the most part, I was a completely different person. The wallet I was given had a whole new identification inside. New ID, a social security card, and birth certificate. The face on the ID matched the face I have now. My new name was Michael Ryan Robinson. I was born March 5th, 1991. I had dirty red hair and green eyes. I lived at 14 Debbie Lane. Connor Dempsey was just a memory. The woman in the home was given the identity of Marcia Robinson, my wife. We had never met, but this was the life she was given. Both of us were in a new environment with new life, new home, and we had no idea how to get back. Both of us just sat on the couch in silence. As I fumbled through my wallet, I found a business card with a contact number. On the back of the card was a message. "Thank you for canceling your suicide." I looked around at my new wife, my home, and my new life. This isn't what I wanted. I was a nobody before, but at least I knew who I was. I was Connor Charles Dempsey, son of Maria and Douglas Dempsey, but now I have no idea who I am, and I have no idea what to do. I beg of you, if you ever have suicidal thoughts, there are better ways around it. Don't do what I did, and for the love of Christ, if you see this infomercial late at night, don't do it.